powered by Riverside FM.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. The effusive speaker looked at me directly with a beaming smile and came forward a step to greet me. I had absolutely no idea who they were. I had a split second to decide what to do. Cogs in my brain whirred as I attempted a recognition. This failed totally, so I was then left with a choice. Do I roll with it and pretend I am delighted to see this stranger? Or do I come straight out with it? Who on earth are you? Just as I was settling on attempting to bluff by using the first option, and had even gotten as far as saying hi, the stranger saw the bafflement on my face and intervened to say both their name and then, much more usefully, where they knew me from. It turned out that they were an acquaintance I'd twice met at barbecues with a mutual friend, and not just met, but in fact spent several hours talking to around the table. This kind of failed recognition incident has happened to me several times recently. They are all variations on a theme, but involve having been approached by someone who knew me, but I didn't know them. Or more specifically, I just couldn't recognize them. Clearly, I am not good with facial recognition. Yes, it was an out of context situation. For example, the lady I just described, I had previously met on a summer's day in casual clothing at a friend's barbecue. When they accosted me, it was on a busy pavement, on a winter's day, and we were both dressed in business wear. But my lack of recognition is not mitigated by this different context, because clearly I was in the same situation to them, and yet they still recognized me. What I'm interested in is that choice. The choice between bluffing and going along with the recognition, or just being straight up about the lack of recognition. The advantage of bluffing is you might get part way through the conversation and then find it resolves itself as suddenly it comes back to you. In which case, you won't need to say anything about initially not recognizing them. Plus, it fits with a general degree of amenability and keeping people on side. The clear downside is that you might well get caught out. It's similar to the situation that many people experience when they do know someone, but they just can't quite remember their name. Doesn't really matter until suddenly there comes a point when it does matter. For example, when you have to introduce them to someone else or refer to them in the third person, and it becomes super awkward. Have you met this person? The alternative to bluffing is much more honest and likely to resolve the situation. It's a straight up admission that, oh, I'm sorry, I don't quite recognize you, or I didn't recognize you out of context. Surely it's a fine way of resolving things. But it does also have some downside. It can actually be a bit upsetting for the other person if it makes them feel like they were previously insignificant. Another incident I have had is being unexpectedly greeted by a former schoolmate in a pub in the local area of that school. Again, I had absolutely no idea who they were. They seemed a bit disappointed and taken aback, but credit to them, they ploughed on, explaining who they were, which classes we had been in together, and how we might know each other. Eventually, they did say their name. When they said it, somewhere in the belfry of a medieval church in an Italian hamlet, the world's smallest bell was very faintly ringing, but it was so faint as to be barely audible. I didn't really remember them, and whilst the ensuing short conversation then passed off civilly, it was clear that he was disappointed by the lack of recognition and I guess an interpretation of inconsequentialness. Here, perhaps the only saving grace was the name, because it was a way in. But names aren't always the solution either. In fact, it takes me to another of the recent incidents, this time in the sidelines of a work event, where, again, I was approached by someone I didn't initially recognize who seemingly knew me. Worse, in this situation, because it was a conference, we were all wearing name tags. so that wasn't an excuse. It didn't help with my recognition, but it did help later on when I turned to the person next to me and said, "Oh, have you met Will?"